Hello and welcome back to The Spotter. I've decided to record again video and audio. I like doing that in the episode with Mr. Josh Croggan. I hope you listened to that one. That was the first guest episode. So welcome back to The Spotter. By now, you should probably know the tagline. What am I kidding? Not big yet, but trying to get that way. Trying to spread the message and try and continuously help people in whatever way we can. So, today's episode, it's not going to be a long one. I wanted to do one basically in regards to, it's Men's Mental Health Month. And whilst I don't really buy into these singular months, days and things, just to celebrate or talk about or bring awareness to things, I think they can be useful. I think that, we should be getting towards a world where, men's mental health and women's mental health is as equal as each other's. It shouldn't just be something that we, aim to bring awareness about, because we should just already be talking about it and doing enough for those things anyway. But in the spirit of Men's Mental Health Month, I wanted to do a little bit first into some of the latest data when it comes to men's suicide rate. So if you go to Samaritans, and again, this is just to bring awareness as to maybe the way in which it's going, and hopefully we can try and curb that and get people to talk. I'm not saying I'm going to be the reason why the figures drop, but I think as a collective in the world, if we can try and do things and talk more, then hopefully that's the way in which it can go. So if you go onto the Samaritans website and look at the About section, policy and research, and then go to suicide facts and figures, you can find the latest from 2023. So it's not up to date in regards to 2024, but it's quite recent. And it says here that 5,656 suicides were registered in 2023, 372 more than 2022. The overall suicide rate was 11.2 per 100,000, which is an increase in the previous year. Male suicide rate was 17.1 per 100,000 compared to the female suicide rate of 5.6 per 100,000. Males aged 45 to 49 were found to have the highest suicide rates. So that's 25.3 per 100,000. And there's obviously some variation in those rates. But yeah, again, really important to highlight. And you can check yourselves if you just want to, if you're curious to, look into these things. Again, it's not something we really want to be looking at, but it's important to talk about. And again, this podcast isn't just about this, but in the spirit of this month and this being one of the topics, I think it's important that we start off this episode with that. And really, again, just getting on the aim of let's just talk more. I want this podcast to be something that people listen to, and then it gets them to take action. It gets them to go and talk to their friends, go and talk to their family members, or someone they haven't spoken to in years, or, just basically get speaking more. If we talk to each other, if we make sure we're there for our friends and family, then hopefully we can create such a movement in which we're not having these issues, we're not having these figures, we're not having things increase year on year. Finding out about individuals, it doesn't take too much, and I think hopefully if you get figures like myself, and eventually down the line some big names coming on that can talk about their own personal struggles, it can start to show us that we're all going through shit. So yeah, I hope that sort of highlights. It did for me. I just literally did the scan before, and I was like, you know what, that's pretty concerning. So yeah, so to lead on from that, again, I know that I did the first episode about this is why I'm here, like the mission of the podcast and things like that, but I thought, why not talk about myself? Just just all about me. More in the sense of I'll open up a little bit more about me, my current struggles day to day, the way in which I think, the way I try and process things, and what I'm trying to improve on. I'm not perfect. I'm far from it. I don't think anyone is, but I'm trying to continuously improve to make the way in which my life flows is better. I think I have got some, issues, if you want to call them that. So we'll just talk about that. So if we're taking it back, to do a massive history lesson, blah, blah, blah. We know that, if you've listened on, that I had my dad, he passed away in 2021. Mum's had a series of health issues. I wouldn't even be able to tell you all of them. If I wouldn't be able to remember all of them. I could do a fairly good job, cancer, AML, bipolar, encephalitis, which again, not something that's very well known. Epilepsy has been in intensive care. Intensive care. Sorry, and yeah, just I can't even think that there's been so much. We could literally write a book about everything that mum's been through. My dad struggled with alcohol addiction, so that was really, again, odd seeing that growing up. So it's kind of put a bit of a thing in my head where I'm like, I find drinking or just having alcohol, I almost I feel guilty drinking. That's my sort of like weird complex that I struggle with. But yeah, so that's like my the issues I've been brought up around. In myself, my own life, like I said, have had anxiety. I still do in a lot of instances. Better with it now. I saw that a lot of my partner as well. That sort of really opened my eyes to the world of anxiety and what people go through. I've struggled massively with panic attacks. Like I said, that was the biggest thing in my life that I've personally struggled with. I didn't think I'd get to the bottom of them, and touch wood, I haven't had one for years. Again, I think that Dad's death spurred that on. I think that, these certain events can lead to a series of panic attacks, and then trying to control them is just another story. But yeah, that really did change my life. So I knew I had to get a grip on that. Been through counselling. I understand how important it is to talk about your problems. No matter how big or small you deem them, someone there just listening to you is an extremely important thing. And it doesn't have to be a counsellor, but that is a good segue into then going to speak to your family members and open up to your friends, as we should do. But sometimes it doesn't come to us so easy, and it didn't to me. So we talk about my childhood, relatively good upbringing amongst a complicated mother and a complicated father, and a complicated match between the two of them. I turned out okay. I think I did anyway. So again, seeing the constant parting of mum and dad, that definitely had its effect on me, especially how I perceive things like marriage, and the importance of creating a strong bond between two individuals. So yeah, it sort of put that vision on marriage, and making sure that when I grow up, that what I had with somebody had to be secure, safe, and protected. It was gonna last. The test of time. There was actually a long period where I thought to myself, absolutely would never get married. I've seen that, if that's what it can do to my mum and dad, and but obviously I didn't realize at the time that they had their own issues. They had, you've got someone that's struggling with alcohol addiction, and then someone that's struggling with depression, trying to, that's a complicated mix. So it should, as a kid, you don't really see that. You just see your mum and dad like constantly back and forth fighting with each other in that sense. And then it works for a period of time, and you're like, what is this? What is marriage? So yeah, that was always complicated, but that definitely, over time, it swayed my view against marriage. I was like, no, never for me. And now I've come to the realization that actually, deep down, I find that I really want just a meaningful connection with somebody, and to make sure that there's just love, and it's to last the test of time. And thankfully, at the minute, I have that, and long may it continue. So that was definitely what I perceived, a relationship to be like when I was younger. So it had some effects on me as I grew up. Apart from that, childhood, things like that were all fairly normal. Grew up nicely in school. I actually enjoyed school. Thankfully, was never bullied, and I didn't struggle in that sense. And I know a lot of people do. I'm sorry, again, if you've been through that. And again, if that's something you feel compelled to talk about, you want to reach out to me and feel like it could be something that we can highlight for other people, please do reach out. So school was fairly normal. As I left sixth form and got into the working world, I went straight into a degree apprenticeship, and sort of worked my way up. And I'm still at the company now, starting to realize, obviously, that whilst I enjoy what I do, I still have things outside that I want to be doing. Coaching, podcast. I want this to kick off and help people on a larger scale. But I feel compelled to help people. I feel like that's my calling. So, I worked years there. It's been a great company to work for. It's provided many opportunities. I've met lots of, lovely people. So I had a fairly normal, I suppose, childhood growing up, school, primary school, secondary school, lots of good friendships, lots of good experiences, gets into the working world, gain qualifications, and I'm in a good career. And now starting to understand myself a lot more at the age of 26. I'm actually truly understanding what brings me purpose in this world. And it is to do things like this, to pick up a mic, talk to people, see where it goes, and then to have people come to me and say, thank you for helping me. That in a nutshell is exactly what I think I need to be doing in life. And I'm grateful to say that, I'm doing it now. I'm starting that journey, and I've only heard good things so far. So fingers crossed we're on the right track. So it's nice to have that sense of, fulfillment and acceptance, I'm taking the right steps. So that's been my journey up to this point, really briefly. But it's not been simple. As we know, I've split the 2 episodes into, talking about my dad, talking about my mum. But in today's day and age, we live in a world where mental health is really at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. It's on the tips of everyone's tongues. And I'm glad that it is, because we need to be doing a lot more. But my ultimate goal is that something like this is normal. We get on microphones, we talk about something that we've struggled with in our lives that we've comfortable to, because we know that it will help somebody else down the line. And I think that, if we can get more people to do that, then we're going to live in a great world in that sense. We're not going to have so many of these, closed off issues that we all struggle with. That, again, leads to things and the statistics that we've seen there with men's mental health, the suicide rates. So, again, I haven't, I haven't known anyone personally that's taken their own life. I've known of that for other people, and I can't imagine how that feels. And again, I wouldn't want to go through that, to experience losing someone. So, we have to just lend a thought for all of those that have been lost in that regard. So, yeah, again, my struggles now. So again, fairly normal life, but because of the things I've been through, I'm realizing more about myself. I've realized a lot through counseling. I'm starting to realize now at the age of 26 that I'm a massive people pleaser. And even recently, I'm still doing things that I'm kind of pissed off with myself, really. But then I have to sort of balance it. Like, I basically reach out a lot of the time to people, and sometimes to the detriment of my own health. I do it because I feel compelled to maintain every single relationship in my life, and almost like a massive juggling act. I feel like I have to maintain every relationship. I have to be the one that reaches out to people, sorts out events, make sure everyone is okay, check in on how the week's got. Do you know what I mean? Just simple things, or try and organize things for down the line, because I feel like if I don't do that, I'm going to upset somebody. I'm going to lose a friendship. I'm going to lose a relationship. And it drains me, because as much as I love helping people and love talking to people, I realize that when I'm pouring myself, pouring me into so many different cups, I'm then left with nothing. And then what drains me on the other side is when I realize that I don't get the same back a lot of the time, and again, it's not that I expect it. It's more that no person is the same. So, and I actually had a good conversation with one of my closest friends about this, that I expect, other people to be as I am to them. And that's just not fair, because people aren't built that way. People aren't as, exactly the same as me. And I shouldn't expect that. But I think I do. I think because I pour myself so much into other people, I expect that same treatment. And I'm trying to work out, work a bit of a balance as to, what to expect, what's reasonable, maybe where I need to pull back and acknowledge that I'm doing too much and I need to focus on myself. Like a big win for me is, doing the podcast years ago, starting training, focusing on myself, becoming selfish in that regard, counseling, doing things for myself. So they're good steps, but I need to still strike that right balance of stop reaching out to so many people. If it's meant to be, if the relationship's meant to last, it will last. You don't have to be the person that, nurtures, nourishes that all the time, because that's not sustainable and it's not fair equally. And I need to accept that, but it's such a gut wrenching feeling to accept that and to try and hold yourself back almost, because I feel compelled all the time to do these things, almost to the sense that if I don't, I actually feel a bit ill. I feel bad. It affects my mental health. I go into weeks feeling like, you didn't message that person, you didn't organize this, you had that thought of reaching out to this person, so why didn't you? And then I will do it. I will still do it. And it really does bug me that I can't grasp that and just like pull back a bit. But maybe on the flip side, I need to accept that that's just the way I am. But I don't know if anyone else struggles with that, feeling like you have to maintain so many relationships, you have to almost be there for everyone, but sort of accept that that's not the way the world works. As much as you can pour yourself into so many others' cups, you're not always going to have yours filled up. It's a real hard realization, but it's something, as I'm getting older, I'm realizing that's just the way in which life is. You can't expect to have that same treatment back all the time. And on the flip side to that, that term of people pleaser, I've talked about that a lot, and I said I was going to do a bit more about it. Now, the way in which I sort of describe people pleaser, basically, it is what it says on the tin. Wanting to please people because you don't want conflict, you don't want to upset people. Again, it's just an unrealistic way of living. But I am a people pleaser. I get anxious about upsetting people, saying the wrong thing, causing an argument, creating conflict between me and someone else. But, on the flip side, I think deep down, I get very, very defensive. So I think that, if I were to cause conflict and upset somebody, but then felt as if someone was targeting me, I would really push back on them. But I don't ever want it to get to that point, because I think maybe deep down, I know that I can be very protective and snap quite easily. I don't do it a lot, but when I do, I do it, it's quite bad. And I don't like that type of person that I am. Again, I think that because of my background, seeing so much conflict, sadly, and not being able to resolve it, has now made me want to be someone that never causes conflict, never upsets people, and is always able to maintain good relationships between people and between myself and others. And basically just avoid any situation of conflict, any potential issue, any route that's going to, mean that me and someone might not be friends. Like I cannot, in my head, I just cannot like comprehend that idea that's even like a possibility. Like I can't deal with that. And it's I've noticed it, like even when I'm making plans with people, I realize that I will try and fit people in days when I know that I haven't got that time. Like if I can't do this time, what about this time? Can't do that day, what about this day? Sometimes things just aren't meant to be. And maybe that's the universe giving signs, but I won't take the signs. I'm like, no, I'll find a way. I'll do this, I'll do that. And again, this whole feeling of pouring yourself into other people's cups and then suddenly you're empty. I think that because I strive to please people so much in everything I do and every conversation that I have, every meet, interaction, I think that it drains me because I strive to help and please people so much that I realize that sometimes I need help. I need someone to talk to. I need someone to just vent to. I need someone to, chuck ideas and bounce ideas around with. But I think I'm known to be this quite positive figure that is always there for others, but I'm not always feeling that way. I just put on a brave face a lot of the time. But again, it just stems back to my background, the way I've been brought up, the conflict I've seen, the issues I've been brought up around. And it has, it's made me this individual that just doesn't want conflict. I avoid it at all costs. I want to make sure that I please everyone. There's always a solution in my eyes. Sometimes there just isn't. Sometimes you're going to lose friendships. Sometimes you're going to piss people off just because of the way you are, or you might say something in a certain way, and that's kind of the way it's meant to be. Maybe that's just the way in which it's supposed to pan out. Sometimes people aren't going to respond to you. Sometimes people are going to come up with excuses. Sometimes people just don't have that same drive as you, have a relationship, to talk, to go off and do things. So, you know, how do I get better at accepting that? I don't know. Again, it probably helps me having people around me that can see that's the way I am and can, reiterate to me that you don't need to change. You just need to learn to accept other people might not be that way inclined, as much as you. I'm not saying everyone's dicks out there or anything like that, but I'm just saying it's just maybe I just need to accept that people are different. Not everyone's like me. Should be. So yeah, it's one of them things where, and this is why I wanted to do this one, because I felt that as much as, this podcast is me and hopefully going to be me in most episodes talking to other people, I want to still keep it, centered around, this is why I started, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, is because I still need to talk as well. I'm not 100% healed. I have issues. I've got trauma. My childhood wasn't, I don't even know what the term is. Like, it wasn't perfect. There is fallout because of the things I've seen. So, this podcast is as much as it is, an opportunity for other people to talk. It's my opportunity to talk as well, and hope that hits home with people. So this has been more of a deeper dive into what I'm struggling with daily, weekly, monthly now. My issues with, anxiety and panic attacks aren't really there at the minute. I'm able to cope with my anxiety and sort of like see certain situations as good anxiety. It's my way of coping with certain situations. But I do struggle with being a people pleaser. And accepting that I can't solve every situation. I can't fix things all the time. And I do struggle with, accepting that not everyone's like me, or the way I am. I shouldn't say like me, but the way inclined I am, in terms of, how often I might reach out and just do things like that. So I just have to accept it. I've got to try and get better at accepting that, dealing with it and processing it. I've got good people around me to do that. But I know I'm not the only one out there that probably feels this way. There's going to be people out there that feel this way. So I thought, I've got to get this out there, use this as an opportunity to talk, and highlight this in Men's Mental Health Month as well, because this is my opportunity to talk in this episode. And hopefully it hits home. Hopefully it helps and just shows you that I'm not truly fixed. I've got constant battles up in my head of, even with all of that, I sometimes feel like you're just not doing enough. You don't take action, even though I do. Like, when I really want to, I do. But I'm still learning about myself. I'm learning that in this life, I really strive, when I'm able to be creative, when I'm able to do things like this, and when I'm able to just think freely. If I get an opportunity to help somebody or go away and try and figure out a solution for somebody, the amount of satisfaction I get from seeing a smile on someone's face or hearing, that was amazing, thank you for that, you've helped me do X, Y, and Z, that I wouldn't be able to tell you anything else that's given me that same feeling. So I know that I've learned recently that I'm destined to help people, whether that's through talking, creating solutions, anything like that. I'm destined to help people, and that I've still got issues that I need to try and get past and learn to accept and, work around. So, but yeah, no one's perfect, are they? So as long as we can talk about these things and, get it out there that we're all trying to be better, trying to do better, trying to grow together, and that we all have struggles, the world will be a better place for this. So let's just do more of this. And again, I hope that highlighting at the start the statistics about men's mental health as well, in particular, just, suicide in general, but men's mental health really does hit home and allows us just to think about the broader picture and do more of this, So if there's one thing about the podcast that I want to, want people to take away, is that talking is a superpower. And if we did more of it, we might not be seeing the numbers that we're seeing now. So hopefully me being a bloke allows for that, acceptance on a larger scale, that we can do this, not be judged for it. We can be vulnerable, and we are still accepted for being that way and for doing so. I don't feel ashamed for saying that I've sought out the help of counselling. I needed that. I don't feel ashamed for saying that I cry. I don't feel ashamed for saying that I struggle still day to day. You know, I feel like I'm not doing enough. I feel like I'm sometimes just not good enough. It's just the way I think we all think that, but especially as men, you know, you are entitled to feel a certain way. You're entitled to talk about it. You're entitled to have people, have these conversations with you. Don't feel like you need to bottle everything up. Be a man, because that's the way that the modern world's taught you to be. Maybe not even just the modern world, but just, the last, 50, 60 years in particular has taught us, that men should be a certain way. Men should be providers. Men should be doing this all the time. It's, the world's changing. You can be who you want to be, literally. So, yeah, I think that if we talk about things more, we wouldn't have so many of the issues we have today. And let's just keep this momentum going. I'm going to be doing that. And, I need everyone's help. Whoever you want to get on the podcast, whether that's yourself, you've got something to talk about, you just want a conversation with me to see where it goes. You've got an individual that you think could really be someone good to get on the podcast. No individual is too big, too small in that sense. In terms of their following, I'll reach out to anyone. I just want to create such a podcast that we can just look back on and people can, scan a list and be like, yeah, I resonate with that. I'm going to click and listen to that. That's my goal. Biggest mental health podcast out there. I'm going to stand by that. That's the goal. We are going to reach it together. So thank you again for listening. Men's Mental Health Month is a special one. And I didn't do the tagline at the start, but this is the podcast for the ones that never ask for help, but need it. And that is, that is a true statement. So make sure you talk, just keep talking, push the message out there, and the world will be a better place. So yeah, stay tuned for the next one. We've got a couple of good episodes coming up with new guests, and I'm going to still be trying to reach out there for more individuals. It's a hard game trying to build a podcast up, but we will do it. And I love doing this stuff. So stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.